In this lesson of How to Excel, we will look at how to create a Likert scale stacked bar chart. Something that hopefully looks a bit like this. In this lesson, we're going to be working with the same data set as the bars and labels lesson, but I'm going to show you how to make that into a diverging Likert scale chart. Now again, we have the data here that start from the country is not a democracy, not all satisfied with the democracy, not very satisfied, fairly, and very satisfied. One of the first things that we want to do is actually sort this so that we can see who is the most satisfied to who is the least satisfied. Again, similar to our previous one, I'm just going to add together very satisfied and fairly satisfied. And we can see that that's not quite in the correct order at the moment, so why don't we go ahead, select all of that, select our whole data set there. In the data ribbon, select sort, sort by most satisfied, largest to smallest, smallest to largest, it doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and do smallest to largest. So we now have this information in at least sorted. Now, in this particular one, we need to go ahead and just copy and paste those names over here. And then we need to insert a gap here. And I will explain what this is for as we come to it. But for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and put minus 0.15, which should give us 15%, all the way through here. And that's a consistent gap that we want, so we're going to go ahead and keep that like that. Now, one of the things that is also a little bit tricky here is that right now the data comes in the order. The country is not a democracy, not at all satisfied, not very satisfied, which that goes on a Likert scale from the least to most extreme. However, for whatever reason, Excel likes to flip these around. So one of the next things that we need to do is actually flip that order just for the ones that will be negative. We're going to keep fairly satisfied and very satisfied here. Now, not very satisfied, we're now going to, instead of copying and pasting, say that that is going to be Madagascar, not very satisfied, so that is 05. Times minus 1 to make it into a negative number. And that we can just drag down. Similarly, not at all satisfied is going to be N5 times minus 1. Go ahead and drag that down. And the country is not a democracy. We're going to go ahead and select that. That is M5 times minus 1, and we've got that. Luckily, fairly satisfied and very satisfied stay in the same order, and we don't have to change whether they are positive or negative numbers. So I'm just going to put fairly satisfied. I'm going to drag this over so that we have it in two columns. And if you double click that green dot right down in the bottom right hand corner, that will fill down the entire row. And now we have all of the data that we are going to be working with. The next step is to turn this into a stacked chart. So we're going to select our data and go over to Insert, and we can go to the recommended charts. That's not quite what we're looking for. So why don't we go to a stacked bar chart, which is exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and put this here. I'm going to expand it a little bit, and we're going to see what we are looking at. Actually, that's not looking too terribly, although I appreciate that there's still some work to do. So why don't we go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit so that you can see what we're working with. For now, I'm going to delete the chart title. You can add that in as and when you see fit. As we mentioned, one of the things that we wanted to do is we always want to make sure that this gap is about half the width of the actual bars themselves. So I've selected the series, And instead of having the gap width of 150, we're putting the gap width to just 50%. This already helps straight away. Now, the next thing that I want to do is we included something called gap because we wanted to create this little hole in the middle. And right now that is filled as red, and that means that it is very difficult to see. So what we can just do is if we just take the fill off, we have the names of all the different countries just straight in there, and we can see that this is already starting to very much come together. Now, there are a few more things that we need to be thinking about. First of all, let's go ahead and work with colors again, and you know what? That is not too bad, but why don't we choose a solid fill, and again, because this is positive, why don't we work with a darker shade of turquoise, and maybe a slightly lighter shade of turquoise so that we can see what's going on there. So that's our fairly satisfied and very satisfied all sorted out right now. Then we need to go over here to our negative numbers, and if we, instead of having it as an automatic, again change this to a solid fill, and maybe let's go over and make this the second lightest orange so that we can still see it. I find that the lightest one is very difficult to see. A slightly darker orange so that we have, again, can see that kind of idea of the gradient of the power, and then we'll go to a really dark one for that last little bit. Now, we have made a lot of progress, but we're not quite done yet. For one thing, this axis no longer makes any sense. So we are going to, first of all, expand this, and then second of all, basically get rid of it. So right now it goes to negative 0.12. What if we made it to negative 0.1 and goes all the way up to 0.9? So that just stretches it out a little bit more. Right now it is also worth saying that for whatever reason, as assuming that it's a number rather than a percentage, so we could just flip that over to percentage and say no decimal places for now. But again, because we've added this 15% gap in here, this is meaningless. So we're going to delete that, and we need to delete these axis grid lines as well. One of the other things that I'm afraid we are also going to have to get rid of is the legend is not in the right order now because of the way that we've had to play with things. So, going to get rid of that as well. Whew, we're stripping everything back. But now we want to start working again on putting labels in. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and put labels on absolutely everything. So instead of clicking twice, I only need to do it once and say add data labels. And here we can choose where we want them again. So if we go over in the format data series, and we can choose, make sure that you have the format data labels selected rather, and we go here, and we can choose whether we want it on the inside base or the inside end. I think in this case I'm going to stick with the inside end for good measure. And one of the things that we notice is that on those really dark colors, it's quite difficult to read. So I'm going to go ahead and actually invert them by, instead of having the text be black or red, flip them over to white so that they're legible. In this particular case, I'm also going to double click on this particular label, and then because it's currently overlapping with everything, and I'm going to again double click on that, and then you need to use your mouse. Now the tricky bit here is to make sure that I might need to zoom in a little bit actually. Use your mouse to pull it over to the side just a little bit. That is not cooperating. There we are. Now we've already changed this to white, so it disappears, so I'm going to double click that one again, and we'll change that back to being more of a black color. Why don't we go ahead and do the same for each of the other series in our chart. And in this particular case, because for the most part they're quite small categories, I'm going to say inside end for whatever reason actually puts them outside the end. Don't ask me why Excel does all of the things that it does. Sometimes it's all a bit nonsense. So I'm going to select a few of these, and there are a few that we just need to, again, kind of move out just a little bit, give them a little bit of room to breathe here, away from that axis. Now, even as I'm doing this, I can hear you saying, but, over here on the left-hand side, they all have a negative sign in front of them, and that's not what we want at all, is it? It's not what we want. So we will come back and correct that as well. Good. Now we want to get rid of that minus sign. So how do we do it? In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to select, again, the data labels. And here we have the option of changing the number. And right now it's formatted as general, as a percentage, but we're going to change it to custom. And we already have this in here. Right now it's formatted so that it has basically one extra decimal point on it. But if we change it to 0% semicolon 0%, then once we click out of that, we see that that has got rid of the minus sign. Don't ask me necessarily why it does this. It's a bit complicated, but what we want to do in all these cases is go to custom, and then we say instead of 0.0, let's just keep it at 0% semicolon 0%, and that will all disappear. Now we have everything ready, with the exception of I do see this particular one has a line drawing to it, and this is just me being a little bit pernickety, but I'm going to take away the leader line so that that doesn't exist right there. Right. Now, last but not least, we want to re-add something of a legend. The way that we can do that is by actually creating a special secret row. And what we need to do then is we need to, on the chart, we see that that is now not part of the chart, but if we go into chart design, we can actually say select data, and instead of it ending there, we're just going to, well, we do want to make sure the whole thing is selected, and hit OK. And with any luck, we've got this extra little nudge of a row in here. And we're going to actually use that to create our legend. So what I want to do is I want to select one of the data labels, because we have the zeros in and on all of them. And instead of showing the value, I want to show the series name, and I don't want to show the value, but I will add in a legend key. And this we can then move over here. We don't know exactly what the order is going to be in. We definitely want to get rid of the leader lines in this particular case. And again, we're just going to do that again and again. And as we keep doing this again and again and again, we're going to slightly change our placement here so that everything can fit okay. We have not very satisfied going there. Not at all satisfied here. Let's move that out just a little bit more. And right now it's hidden because the rest of these are in white. So if I just select that, and again go into home, or you can right click and do this the other way, I'm just going to go ahead and make that black. And okay, we can tidy this up just a little tiny bit so that that looks like it's more in a straight line. And we can always add in our title. But that's the basics of it. We now have a very clear divergent Likert scale chart done with stacked bars.